All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. It is another episode of Wireheads. Today is episode 13, the luckiest number, if you don't live in the West. It's a good episode number, I think. Oh, yeah, and I just realized I'm not playing any music. Hold on, guys. I will fix that really fast. But hello, everybody. Welcome back. I'm really excited. This last week has been absolutely fucking insane, to say the absolute least. Yeah, we've had a lot happen in the last week. We've had the CEMK officially be put up for pre-order. We now have a release date. Digital is being made available on June 21st. The shipping for the physical is starting on the 24th. So those of you who are, you typically order through Artel Games, if you have not yet put in your pre-order, it is up on their website, artelgames.com, for the physical, and on Drive Thru RPG for the digital. The digital is only $15. And then I think the combo pack for PDF plus Roll20 is like, what, Diamond? Like, is that 25?
I think it's either 20 or 25.
Yeah, I'll look it up real quick while I continue talking. But yeah, we've got that announced in the last week. I have been working my ass off on the adventure, which I will be running at Gen Con this year. Just got a first play tested on that. So that's very exciting. And that kind of leads us in to our topic for tonight. So a lot of you came to, those of you who have come to this through my channel, we do a lot over on the channel about GM education and making you feel comfortable running your own games, because I've always been a very, very, very firm proponent of the idea that anyone can GM, even if you know nothing about the game at all. You're coming in totally fresh, like you've never played the game. You can run the game, even if that is your experience level. No problem with that whatsoever. So tonight we're going to talk about how do we do that a little bit. And a lot of GMing, the best GMs will tell you, which I do not claim to be among their number. However, I do my best. I'm no Brennan Lee Mulligan though, but I think even people like Brennan, even the guys over at Critical Role, both the players and GM alike would, I think, agree that the strongest tool in a GM's toolbox is being extremely flexible and adaptive and being incredibly good at improvising. So tonight we are going to talk a little bit in our first topic about GM improvisation. So there is this idea, I think, that most GMs have at some point in their time running any game, whether that's Cyberpunk or D&D or Pathfinder, or like even like rules light systems like Cyborg, where you want to plan for a session. And I feel like when you're new, especially, because like Diamond, when you were a new GM first running games, how much did you prep, would you say?
For me, I did, let's see, battle maps, encounters I wanted for the day, or like a few different encounters that could have possibly have happened during the day. And also kind of where the party is going. Like, I'd say I had it lucky that I had some fantastic GMs that kind of taught me like what I needed to know coming in. However, I could say there was one thing I was always underprepared for that I didn't realize was a thing. So the Rogue and the Bard decided to do some bullshit. And yeah, so there was always that I was just never prepared for what the rogue or what the rogue wanted to steal, or what the bard wanted to screw, or what the barbarian thought was a great idea to just smash into.
Yeah, I mean, and that's fair. I feel like the biggest, most important thing to any game system, when you're going to talk about like improvising, thing number one is read the rules. Like, you don't necessarily need to have the best hand on structure, things like that, because once you've read enough pre-written gigs, which is why that's usually what I recommend any new GM if you're stepping in for the very first time to any game system, find what pre-written adventures exist for the system already, assuming that there isn't like a starter box set, or there isn't some kind of like intro adventure in the back of a rule book, which I know Cyberpunk has kind of both of these things. We have easy mode for like an introductory thing. Soon we'll have the Edge Runner mission kit, which is also a starter kit. And the core rulebook has several screen sheets in the back of it. There are also the free ones that you can get on the DLC page of the Our Tell Story in Games website that serve as a good, I think, stepping off point into the way to write those things and run those things, because they offer you a glimpse into how the writers want to structure their ideas. So that's where I would start, right? Start with the written structure of things from people who already know what they're doing, just so that you kind of know, like, okay, this is how I should be thinking about like building my thing out. And then thing number two that I would think about is absolutely read your rule book. Understand what the rules are there to do. Try to like get as much of that figured out ahead of your first session as possible, which you're not going to be perfect the first time around. None of us are when we try something new. That is 100% okay. As I think I've said before plenty on the podcast here, I've definitely said this on my channel before, you do not need to be perfect. The first time you GM, you will make mistakes, but the important thing above anything else is that you have fun. If you're having fun, you're winning. That is all you need to do. Have a good time. The rules, you can kind of retcon and figure your way back through what you got wrong on your first or second or third session. You can go back later and think, oh, damn, yeah, net running works this way. Or, oh, this one rule within combat, I was running that wrong. Oh, I was making my explosions too big, which is something I very recently learned. I was making my explosions too big. So you learn. You learn. You'll always be learning. You'll never be 100% perfect until probably years in, when you really have everything down to a science. That their explosions are never too big, says Prepper Jack. Yes, while I agree, if you're running your explosions, rules is written for things like grenades. There is a box that fits into, and I was going too big on my boxes. So, bottom line is this: if you are having fun, you're doing it right. So where we start talking about improvisation, any systems rules, whether we're talking about Cyberpunk or Blade Runner or Cyborg or Dragonbane or Pathfinder or D&D, the goal of a rule system should always be to give you, basically, I think of them as accessibility tools, right? They're a way for you to more easily and more efficiently work through things that would otherwise be really complex. That like simple narration or simple guidance, you could say, through a scene would not easily allow for, right? So that'd be complicated actions like combat, things like breaking through an electronic lock. Net running as a whole subsystem is full of that, right? So like these are there so that when you're running these things, you just know how to get through that easily. And then what you're improvising usually just has to do with knowing what check to call for when someone does something weird. Like Diamond, I'm gonna lean on you for this. What is the weirdest check that you could think of you've ever had to call within the context of Cyberpunk? Like, What was the weirdest thing someone asked you to do that you wanted to resolve with a check once they'd asked the question?
Well, Bold Cup of Joe, if you're listening right now, you, when the first time you asked, can I throw a dumpster at them? And in every campaign since, Joe has thrown a dumpster at someone. But the first time I was just like, okay, but like, how would this work? Because like, is it a melee weapon? Do I use athletics? What's the damage on it? And that's just kind of what we've clarified, that it's just, you know, a poor quality, very heavy melee weapon that, you know, uses athletics when thrown. Does not have armor. One of the other ones that I've gotten before also is just gosh, I've had a player roll to ask if they could be pointed in the direction that they needed to go, and I'm just like, how do I do this? And I figured, you know, why not have the agent point out, you know, a suggestion to them, like, all right, roll library search.
Because like when you say the direction they needed to go, you mean like they need to be like going a couple miles through the city and they needed to just
they
like
lost
get a
the
route.
Plot.
Interesting.
It was just like, all right, like I have no idea like what I'm supposed to do with this information. Like I understand like there's a lot of information here. I don't know what to do with it. I'm like, okay, roll a library search or a deduction. All right, library search. And then I just mentioned, well, your agent is suggesting you go here as this maybe a start with a connection to this clue. Oh, okay. All right. And then we got them back up and going.
Yeah. Deduction's a really good one, Prepper Jack. That's what Diamond Diva was just saying. Yeah. Well, in library search, I think the library search idea is kind of genius, I'll be honest. Because, like, I think that the most powerful thing that agent AIs give GMs as a tool is you have a voice that can spring off of a thing that the players should always have on them, that can serve as your hint voice to the player base or to the players in game, like through something they're carrying. So it's an in-universe hint line to an extent, which is honestly, I love that whole idea behind agents. So yeah, I think, and Prepper Jack mentioned this as well in chat a little earlier, is being the world in Cyberpunk requires a lot of imagining the world, as they leave a lot of meat on the bone for GMs in terms of world building. Yeah. And there's a lot of things, like if you ask questions like Diamond, I have answered questions this way, as well as a bunch of the other admins over in the RTG server. When someone asks a question about something that doesn't have a firm definition in the core rulebook or a supplement or something, there's a lot of in the moment decision making that needs to happen that they don't fully define a rule for, because either the mechanics of whatever is being asked are so complex that giving them just a definite, like, this is how you resolve the rules for whatever the thing is, would be so cumbersome to like have RTG define it, that they just are like, well, we don't want to do that, because then it takes power away from the GM. And it also maybe introduces more crunch and complexity to the system than we would want to add. And that's something that I think most GMs who are new especially don't always think about, is like, not everything is going to be spelled out for you, and that is a good thing. That's not a bad thing to have room for interpretation, because that leaves you able to do things that work best for your table. Especially if we start talking about really complicated things like You're on a moving vehicle and you, while the vehicle is moving, want to do something complicated like try to jump off that vehicle and onto another moving vehicle at the same time. Like, if you look hard enough through adventures, there's like in Red Chrome Cargo, there are ways that the writers of the game have interpreted how that could work. So you can kind of use that as a...
did it in Hot Pursuit.
Yeah, and in Hot Pursuit now we now have that. That one's fresh though. Like I haven't even had the proper time to really read through it and get that figured out. But just as an example of that, like now we have a defined set of rules for that. But about a month ago we really didn't. And like that's pretty big. Just being able to define that for your table, because that lets you be as kind or as ruthless to your players as is appropriate for them based on what of your own players and table. All of that stuff kind of comes into play where you can be more forgiving if you've got a bunch of new players and you don't want to kill them in the first gig. While I take a very no holds barred approach to Cyberpunk, even I am a little more forgiving in the first handful of gigs in a new campaign compared to what I get later on, where I'm like, all right, you wanted the whole fucking kit and caboodle thrown at you. You're gonna get the kitchen sink. Like, here you go. So it's turns into that later in a campaign where I'm less afraid of guardrailing against a TPK. So yeah, I guess Diamond, what I guess are some of your favorite improv tools in terms of like, like when you're going through a scene and you're trying to like build out, how forgiving or merciless are you generally, especially like with newer players?
Okay, so with newer players, I don't want to like, immediately, kill new players right out the gate unless they do something very flagrantly stupid. Flagrantly stupid as in, I start shooting at the cops. Like, don't do that. Don't piss off the pigs. And yeah, you're gonna get the business if you start shooting at the cops, because they're walking around with assault rifles. You're gonna get mowed down, and then you're gonna wonder, well, ouch, Diamond, that was a lot of damage. I'm like, well, yeah, they're gonna deal with you. They're gonna give you the business.
Yeah.
But like sometimes during some like scenes where there is a call for like just enough violence but not enough to break out into an initiative, I will go with the narrative flow of the room. So like tonight, we had 8-Bit diving over the table. Yori get out of 8-Bit's grip, but while that's going on, Taz is able to smash Yori into the wall.
Right.
Yori, being kind of an older, a little bit more frail man, probably couldn't quite handle getting, his head smashed up against bulletproof glass a couple times around. And there's been times like when that goes on that I feel it handles a lot better. And sometimes I just kind of decide like how damage needs to be dished out at that point.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that's totally fair. I am a firm proponent of narrative flow too when it makes sense, because like the scene tonight is 5 players plus an AI and one of our agents against one old man who came very unarmed. So yeah, like rolling initiative for that didn't make a ton of sense. And it was, I agree, like, I think you handled that really well. And I believe in the idea that, like, you will have situations where your players are just going to, like, all right, well, this is what I want to do. And you kind of logically know, I think, like, where the, like, conclusion is going to land on it. Or you have a decent enough certainty that it's going to end a certain way. And you're able to just kind of, like, you know, hand wave it and be like, all right, this is how we're resolving it. There are times, though, even in those situations where, like, in order to keep a sort of pacing to the room, I'll still have my players roll initiative. And this is what we call GM fiat. This is where, like, Diamond and I, neither way is particularly correct or one better than the other. Except for mine is better than hers, of course, but
vice versa.
Yeah. Exactly. No, but for real, that neither way is particularly correct or better than the other. But because we have different ways of running our tables, she and I are going to make a different call related to those scenarios where something that doesn't quite cross the line for her to run initiative might cross the line for me to call initiative. And that's also okay. That's something that, like, you'll kind of get a feel after, like I said, about 2 or 3 gigs, I think, is usually about how long I need with a new group to really build out my understanding of, like, okay, this is what the group is okay with, or this is the pacing that the group is comfortable with. And then we just kind of run with that as our baseline going forward. And if ever that needs to change, usually there'll, at the bare minimum, I'll bring it up as, like, a notice to the players when I'm, you know, looking to change it, so that they aren't caught off guard when later in the session I might, like, have to do things a particular way. But on the other side too, if ever I've, like, been interpreting something one way and then the players come up and they're like, well, I don't really feel like this is fair or whatever. Or maybe I was just misinterpreting a rule, which I talked about before. Like, you will do this. And then you find a way to retcon it and you're like, cool, we've solved that. Or you just, say, okay, well, yeah, you're right. We misinterpreted that. And it's put you guys on the back foot this way. So this is what we'll do to rectify for that, right? You figure out, like, the balance in the moment and then you run it correctly moving forward, or, you have a correct understanding of it. So, maybe when it's appropriate or inappropriate to make exception to that for the future. But yeah, I think the kind of the next thing within, GM improv, this is the thing that I think can be both the most fun and the most frustrating given the context. It just depends on what your context is for it. But Diamond, when someone goes off beat and suddenly the pathway they are walking through is one that you didn't think about, and the alleyway they're walking down involves a whole different cast of characters than the ones you've prepared, and the ones you prepared suddenly don't look nearly as appropriate as the scenario they're walking into would allow for, what do you do?
Now, I suppose this really brings to mind, as in, like, the players are just, like, going in a completely different direction than where the plot's going. It kind of walk. I've had it before where players have taken, wrong, tried to, wander off elsewhere. So, I'll pull up on the random encounters table, like, things that may happen, just to kind of keep the spice going.
Sure.
And, I've had it before. Players got caught between a firefight between Red Chrome Legion and Maelstrom, and, well, both groups of those kinds of gangers, I mean...
Yeah, there is no good guy team in that scenario.
No. I mean, some of them seem to have a favorable eye for Maelstrom, I guess, but
Ironically, I'd say that if you had to make a judgment call between those two as a player, yeah, Maelstrom would be the just ever so slightly better option to team up with.
One's a bunch of people addicted to Chrome, another one's just addicted to being dicks.
Yeah.
But well, so they get some bullet holes. One of them ends up seriously wounded, and they end up in that whole mess. And well, then finally their agent's like, by the way, I checked your GPS. You were supposed to go this way. I will do that. I will let them. No, it's not so much punishing the players for going off beat, but Night City's a violent place. You're gonna go wandering into places that you're not sure where you're going.
Sure.
Well,
so what if here's the I guess the real spirit of the question I wanted to get your take on.
Okay.
Say you've given them like a forking path, right? Kind of like to a certain extent this was true of tonight. Where like you kind of were like, okay, well, like Bobby Tables is one pathway. In pursuing the meet he had with Yori in Redline was like one path that you could pursue immediately, because 3 pieces kind of laid out very clearly like that's where you should be going. But on the other route, we got intel that was like, okay, well, like, but talking to Styles first could open up some additional possibilities here, or at the bare minimum, add some context before you run off to this meet in Redline. But in that slightly forked path there, or where I guess one was more of a direct path, the other was more meander around and then met back up the other side. There is the potential that I thought of a third path, right? That split the difference between the middle there. That maybe you as a GM, because I've had this happen to me before personally as a GM, that middle path isn't really off. It's not off script, right? So much where it's like you're going in the same
path of bed.
Well, like I guess tonight it would have been maybe going to investigate where Bobby was taken and fine-toothed combing it a little more, rather than trying to rely on either person, which you may well have prepped for. But I'm guessing right. But I'm saying more like if you a GM hadn't prepped that third path, then in a case where like that is a third path that you maybe just like in your preparation didn't think about, how do you handle improvising in those scenarios, I guess is more my question.
In some cases when it becomes plot relevant, sometimes I am not above doing it. I will tell the party, hey, this was a route I was not expecting. Can we please take 5 minutes and I will figure out how we can move the plot forward from here, because I like the idea.
Okay.
It's more of a matter of not saying no. It's more yes, but I need a second. Hold on.
Yeah. No, I think
the much more pertinent one.
Yeah.
I could probably figure it out off seeing my ass. I would just have to check with my notes to make sure that like everything that's showing up at that extra route ties into the main plot of the day.
Right. Like it doesn't break anything either in terms of progression, right? Yep. That's totally fair. That's totally fair. Yeah, like something that I've started doing after Jay Gray kind of showed off it was one of the previews for the CEMK. I think it was on Twitter. He put out a picture of the cover page, front and back cover page for the jacket booklet. And on the back of it, he had removed all the text from them, but he had a copy of, it was a flow chart for beats and things like that. And I'll say this to any GM that wants to be very structured in their planning. If you do even a really simple flow chart, because I've been working with doing that for Pay to Win, the gig I'm running at Gen Con, I've been building that out. And when I ran my first like full test of the gig the other night, the players were tugging at a lot of different threads all at once rather than picking like one plot thread to really pull on hard and just follow through. So that having that flow chart and kind of separating out like where they should be at each step in the gig really helped me to like not throw them too far ahead in the pacing and still make sense, even though they had a lot of different pathways they technically could have burrowed down that would have led them in all kinds of different directions.
Yeah. And like what King Ghidra 69 here says, he like communication's the best skill here. And honestly, yeah, sometimes you just need to kind of leave the signs out there. Mm-hmm. And sometimes if you gotta look at your players and just be like, hey, this is really off the plot for what we're doing today. I've had to do that a couple times where it's just like, you know, yeah, you guys are going up to Watson. Well, I need to go down to Haywood to go check this possible thing. It's like the folks down at Haywood are not going to know anything about what you got there. You are going to burn like 4 hours of your day doing this if you do so. Like, I wonder, do you ever have to draw lines there where it's just like that is really outside the bounds of what, or outside the scope of what you're doing today?
I think that's very context dependent, and I think a lot of it is defined. I don't feel it's as defined, ironically, by real life time pressure. I think it's more defined in those instances by time pressure within the game itself. Like, okay, you've got a week before this next gig, right? And in that week, you need to prepare for whatever this heist is going to be, for example, right? So you need to kind of scope the place out. You need to figure out like what are your entrances, your exits, maybe scope the defense, like what's the opposition force look like in terms of like what they can throw back at you if they get intense about it, or they really want to like prevent you from progress. All of those things are things that I think are more influential over my decision to say, yes, you can do that, or no, you can't. Because my core assumption is unless the thread they're trying to pull on is totally fruitless, I don't want to say no to them. Because odds are that if they're asking to do something like that at my table, typically it's because they're pursuing something from their backstory, or they're pursuing a personal agenda that they feel has relevance to whatever the core narrative is. And a great example of this actually was just Monday on Neon Inferno. I thought we were going to get through like a little bit of an intro beat because everything that happened in Neon Inferno on Monday took place over the course of a single day, basically. And I thought we were going to kind of speed through the last minute prep and then like get right into the midnight market without too much work ahead of that. And instead what's happened is the players really thought hard about like how prepared do we want to be? How like many different ways do we want to split this preparation up? Who's able to handle gathering intel on this aspect or that aspect? And obviously knowing like Nyla has to go and, probe their network and really test the limit of what is in there, right? And so those sorts of things I think are valid, right? Like it's valid to want to pursue that, or even to want to pursue like what Connor did. I'm trying to find this lost friend of ours that was like a large motivation for my character to get in the position that they're now in. And now I'm going to start hunting threads down related to them. And I'm like, absolutely. So even if it takes us a little time to like weed through that, I think that those things are important. But I will let the players know, we can extrapolate if you pick up anything by going there. I'll have you roll like a local expert or a streetwise check. And what I'll do on my end of the screen is I'll just set that DV really, really high. Because like, I'm not going to say, no, there's nothing down there. But unless there's like a miracle, right? That like maybe you have an old contact that you know might have relevance, or knows something that could be topical for whatever you're trying to accomplish. And it's a big shot in the dark. I will straight up say, yeah, like between your best efforts and like, you know, your additional attempt at like data reconnaissance or something, you get the idea that there's probably nothing of value in that direction, and you might spend an hour looking and just nothing fruitful comes of it. And we hand wave it that way. That way, I'm not saying no. I am allowing for there to be a chance, but I'm not giving them a likely odds that that's gonna happen. Okay. Yeah. So a lot of that is I think about how I counterbalance for that kind of thinking, and I've gotten better with it over time. There was a time where I was very frustrated whenever we had to call the scene early, because like, oh man, we didn't get as far as I wanted to tonight, and it would cause me like actual frustration, and it got me a little wound up a few times, and then I kind of learned to like let that go and realize you don't need to have a heavy hand in determining like what happens next. You can just let your players like investigate. And in those instances, typically what I try to do, and this is a lesson I learned from Blade Runner, is always think about what the enemy force is accomplishing with that spent time, right? Like, if it's not critically time sensitive that the players be in a specific place at a specific time, such as the night market, right? Like, that is happening at a specific place and a specific time. And if they're not there at that time and place, they lose that chance, right? So, like, obviously, I'm going to prep for that because, like, this is effectively a canon event, at least that this is happening at a particular place and time, right? The context around how that plays out, though, can change. It is malleable, right? So it's about allowing for the malleability of those contextual elements to kind of then filter in, and like just being allowing of that. Yeah. So I'm curious kind of what your thoughts are on that, because that's kind of my process.
Like, I guess looking at it that way, that is a bit more understandable. I just also looked at it from the point of like when some folks are doing one shots that take place in a very local area. It's just like this is where the gig is taking place. That's when I have to kind of draw those lines. Just like that's kind of outside the parameters of what you guys are up to today. But that's like on the very limited one shots. Now, like with the groups that are like repeatedly present, yeah, you know, you're gonna burn some time, and some groups have learned that, you know, yeah, you can go out your way here to go check out the place, see if you find anything, and that time burned, that, you know, puts a distance between the opposition and you. That, yeah, I've had that before, you know. It was already like almost a little too late by the time the AV was taken off.
So here's I guess what I'm curious about is, can you give an example of like a really limited one shot where like there wouldn't be something that the players like that's like worthy of like 2045. Oh, I get you.
You are literally on one block in Little China. Trying to think other groups. Smash the Box. Like Smash the Box, you know, taking place, you know, in the neighborhood of South Night City. Why do you want to go to Watson? That's my question.
That's fair. Yeah.
That's kind of where it is. Now, if it's like one of the bigger, more open world campaigns, no issue with it whatsoever. Right.
But yeah, that's I think slightly off topic for what we're talking about. But I will say this: I think that that's one of the great weaknesses of Scream Sheets, in my opinion, is just how narrow the scope can get with them. but they're useful tools for like developing like a this is what we're gonna do today kind of gig, as long as the players are open to being like, you could say railroaded. I don't know that I would quite go that far. But as long as the players are open to having like a defined like start point, then scream sheets work really well. But yeah, I agree that like when you have something like Break the Box or Hilaria, it creates this kind of strange rift where like the players don't get a lot of say if you're like dead set on like this is what we're running. Now a remedy for that might be helpful, and this is where some of that improv comes in. The potential, and this would work I think better at a physical table than if you're running on a VTT, just because of like VTT prep is more laborious. Like it takes a lot more time and effort to like put your assets together because you have to program all that into the VTT. But like you could prep 2 scream sheets at the same time, so that like if the players don't want to pursue one, they could pursue the other. And then it does give them some power of choice. It gives them some of that agency back, but it does then give a greater amount of work for the GM to do. It puts a lot more on the GM's shoulders.
But yeah. Outside that, like I really I do allow my players that kind of liberty to like for those that are part of the much more open world campaigns, that you know, if you feel there's something there that you might benefit from, be my guest. So that's, and you know, I'll figure out if there's something.
Sure. Well, and another remedy that comes to mind is giving them maybe like a day heads up of like, hey, in a day this thing's gonna happen, right? And that gives them a day where if they really got anything that they want to cover that they feel is more important, you've now given them space for that to happen and not be intrusive. That is another, I think, really solid way to seed that in a way that doesn't rob players of their agency. Even if the scream sheet doesn't necessarily as written provide for that, usually they're like 2, most 3 pages, where one of those pages is an article effectively, that is a handout. So like there is definitely, this is the other thing with scream sheets, they're not full of a ton of structural elements, unlike longer gigs for like the incident or like anything out of Tales of the Red would be. But that's, you know, that's okay. I think that if anything is a good education tool for you as a GM to understand, like, here's how you improvise the extra stuff that normally would fit under like a story structural element, like a development or a cliffhanger, and like how to build that into your games on the fly when you're not certain of all the variables, right? Or when they're not all spelled out with the level of like confidence that you get in like a longer beat mapped adventure of some kind. But yeah, so here's the next. Did you have something you want to bring up on that?
I suppose one thing that I had in mind when it comes to improv, when you handle, because like I know we have Hot Pursuit,
yeah,
but when you do like foot chases, how do you improv? Because we don't like have like, you know, exact like rules for foot chases exactly, but like, is there a way that you tend to rule those? Because I tend to do athletics versus athletics, just to kind of see like where people are at and how people are performing.
I mean, you could take the hot pursuit rules and just define move stat bands instead of the speed of the vehicle, and break it down in a really similar fashion. But then yeah, you'd probably run athletics checks and like the further apart your ranges are, the harder it'll be for the slower party to catch up or stay out ahead if that's the goal, right?
Yeah.
That'd probably be how I would do it. Borrow that page out of Blade Runner's book, because that's effectively how it's handled there too. Is just like, if you've got better mobility or whatever, you're gonna have no problem with catching up or breaking away if you're the one who's running from the chaser. You'll have less of an issue fulfilling whatever your objective is as the player in that scenario. But yeah, I'd probably do athletics because that's effectively what that skill is measuring. So
but
here's.
You had something?
Oh no, go ahead. You're good.
Oh no. Well, I was wondering what you had in mind. That's all I had.
Like what I had in mind for the athletics thing.
Or no. Well, you were just bringing it up. I'm so sorry.
No, you're totally fine. I was gonna say the next bit of improv, and this is the one that I really like. So the third path is one thing because that's one aspect, and that might require you to come up with like a whole new scene that maybe you didn't think about before, or maybe it requires you to like bring into higher fidelity a scene that you did prepare, but like it was supposed to be like a liminal space, like they were just supposed to pass through it. You didn't need a battle map initially for it. Now you suddenly need the battle map, and you're like, fuck, okay, I didn't prepare a battle map for this. Which again, more of an issue in a VTT than it is in a physical table, because all this means is maybe you pull out blank graph paper or a battle grid and just expo marker on it to define your boundaries or whatever. But in a similar vein, when you introduce a character to players, and in your mind you're like, all right, so this is just some random security guard. I didn't even have time to I didn't even prepare a name, didn't even think of preparing a name, because they're just supposed to be some nobody that talks to the players and gets them from A to B or whatever, or they serve as a narrative device of some kind that maybe the players don't even interact with directly, right? They're supposed to be like secondary dialogue that's like atmospheric or whatever. But for whatever reason, the context on this is always going to be a little different. But for whatever reason, the players have chosen then to, rather than just accept it as the background noise of the scene or something, they choose to directly interact with the character. And they start to build this character into something far more important than you would initially design them into. And then suddenly, if they take this out further than that, you could have this character turn into someone that they care about or something, or they despise, right? One of two potential outcomes. And how do you handle improvising that at your table when there's suddenly this extra character now that you're like, shit, I didn't think of I don't know their backstory. I don't even know their name. I just know that there's some security guard working on the gates of this construction yard or whatever. And now I need to come up with a full, they need to become a full-fledged person, now. What do you do to do that?
Well, I tend to give a singular name, just a first name. Because most people aren't going to go by their full names unless you force that out of them. However, something and I take a page out of Blade Runner's book for this one. It talks about when you give them a kind of their distinguishing appearance. Quirk.
Okay.
Give to, if you really want to make the guy stick out a little bit more, if the players are really looking into who this guy is, I've got someone that, I mean, 8-Bit met them. They were just supposed to be some, card playing goober that, can't even get into the hollow, that, the Reaper. Oh gosh, I forgot what name I gave the guy. Frick,
Yeah,
I have my notes up.
I don't even remember it
He's
either.
literally a faceless nobody.
Yeah, and I mean,
Like,
I basically treated him like a faceless nobody too. I just
you know,
leveled the gun at his chest after he
We're-
decided to be a prick about everything.
you know, he wears baggy, edgy, dark clothes, and
Yeah.
you know that's as much as you know about. Like, you know the guy I'm talking about. He doesn't have a name.
100%.
Guy.
Even I can't think of what name was given to him. I think you gave him a name in the moment. It escapes me now. But yeah, I mean, I knew what his purpose would be in that scenario.
Yeah.
Maybe not super consciously at the time, but like even like there's a subconsciousness to that where you're just like, oh yeah, this is some nobody, and 8-Bit views him as a nobody, so I'm gonna treat him like a nobody, and have no love for him. That said, if he recurred into another scene in the future, I would treat him with a little more weight now, because like now I know who you are. I've dealt with you before. And the last time I was kind enough to let you walk out after trying to cheat me and threaten me with your whole posse at your back, like that was somehow going to win you a fight against me and my abilities. So like that would change that, obviously. Like that shifts the context a little bit. But
And
yeah.
sometimes, like when I generate characters, I want to try to make like their names as forgettable as possible.
Sure.
But make their who they are a little bit more memorable.
Mm-hmm.
Now I have a cop
Mm-hmm.
that I use, but that I use both in Blade Runner and I use in Cyberpunk Red. His name is Wade. Wade is your average overnight beat cop. Anytime you encounter him in the morning, he is tired as fuck. He is grouchy. And he is always chewing on something. His pen, gum, fingers, something. He's always chewing on something. That is what people know him for. It's just like a cop that's chewing on something all the time. What's his name? Wade? Yeah. You'll I'm trying to think what other memorable characters out there.
Well, I know I mean, it's a written character in Danger Gal Dossier, but it always feels like they show up as a sort of shoo-in when the scene calls for his flasher. That they've come up a couple times.
Yeah. He sure does. I mean, he really has that NPC feel to him. Like,
yeah.
Look for the quirks. Like, look for things to give that character that they just do shit that could be a little bit annoying, or maybe they smell a little funky. I mean, you guys know Glades. I came up with Glades off the top of my head way back then. She was one of those characters that was just like, who was gonna be a throwaway character, but everybody loves Glades.
Everyone loves Glades. Glades is an old smoker. She got a very acute case of emphysema. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Now, Prepper Jack, I like your question. Who doesn't smell a bit funky in Night City? True. Now, what if you actually smell funky to everyone else in a city where y'all smell funky?
That's true. I mean, you're either exceptional or you hang out in two very different parts of the city, and that funk is a very different kind of funk. That would be my other argument. So there's one last thing, because we've got about like 5-ish minutes, give or take, in the first hour here. So the kind of the last thing I wanted to ask just before we run out of time is what happens if you built a challenge out, especially like if you've got an ongoing campaign. This is something you're more likely to deal with. Say you, like tonight, right? We have 5 players at the table. Say for whatever reason, 2 of the 5 of us couldn't be there in a given week, and your prep has centered around prepping for 5 people. How much room for adjustment when you are defining encounters and those other kind of elements of your adventure that are kind of dependent on your player numbers? how do you deal with a sudden like, oh, I'm going to be 2 players shorter than I was initially?
I've actually dealt with this one before, and it's why whenever I'm talking about an NPC and their entourage, I never give specific numbers for that entourage unless it is publicly known that they travel with these specific people.
Sure.
And then if they travel with these specific people, maybe I'll adjust some of the equipment some of their entourage might have to make sure that there's still a fighting chance when there needs to be.
Yeah, but they're not going to like totally blow the players out of the water or something.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe you have in the case of one of these groups, we have someone known as Mr. Oz. Mr. Oz is an executive that works in Biotechnica. All right, he's known to have 2 bodyguards and a secretary. And the thing is, just like these bodyguards are a little bit tougher. But I had to dial things back a little bit because not everybody was there that was combat oriented. So I lowered the bodyguards from hardened down to normal bodyguards, and shotguns to poor quality shotguns. Also, hello, Saves versus Death.
Yeah, thank you for the raid, guys. Welcome in, raiders. Hello. We are just getting to the end of our first segment for the night. We have a whole hour and a half left here, though, for our second segment and then our Q&A. So if you have questions, feel free to ask them. If you have questions around GM Improv and we didn't somehow cover them earlier in the episode, definitely don't be afraid to ask those. We can cover some of that in our Q&A.
Don't worry, we're really friendly around here.
We're real friendly around these parts. We like you guys that come in and raid. Yeah, no, we're gonna have fun. So welcome in, everybody.
You smell nice.
Oh my god, damn it. Yeah, but I think you raise good points around improvising character and doing that and adjusting as well, like based on the players you have. I know another method that I have used to add my 2 cents on top of that is if the players are in a place where it's not imperative you do whatever you've prepped for the entire group, knowing that it would probably take the entire group to do what you've prepped. The thing I usually will lean against then more is like, if the players have personal agendas, I'll quickly cook up something for them, understanding the new group dynamic and stuff like that. I will say that if you're gonna do that probably takes a little more. I would argue that would take a little more experience. Like, I definitely wouldn't have been as comfortable doing that when I was brand new as a GM. But like, again, once you understand your group dynamic well enough, you'll know the sorts of things missing when 2 players aren't there of your 5-person group, and you're like, all right, well, we're missing our, the 2 people who are absent are our solo and our rocker boy. So we're going to be a little shorter on muscle than we normally would be, and our influence is going to be maybe a little less, or maybe even non-existent, depending on like the remaining roles. If that was your only face, like you might be, like a little shorter. So like now you have to define like, okay, will it still be fair to the players? Will everyone still have a good time if I'm running as I initially had intended to? Because there are cases where that can be true, right? Obviously. But then there are other cases where like you need a full for time. And that is the hard thing, is like, how do you fill for that time in some of that context? And so it comes down to like, there are times where I've just called we're going to skip the week, because we don't really have the wiggle room in the narrative to like have you guys, those of you who are able to make it, go off, do your own thing, while the rest of us are, still focused on like the main mission. But they're, that comes down to a judgment calls, like, what can you do with the lesser number of people? Nala says, I like to tell my GM in the interim between sessions about plans I'd have Definitely not everything, but I know if I want to do something maybe bigger, I'd want them to know it. And I will say as a GM, that is probably one of my favorite things when my players take that initiative. Because if you let me know what you want to get done, I will make room for it. Maybe not in like the very next session, but we might be able to start on whatever that goal is you have or whatever, you know? Like it's not going to be perfect every time, but it's going to be, we get close enough, right? It's close enough to get the ball rolling on that. But yeah. Anything else you want to add on the subject of GM Improv, Diamond?
I think we've covered all our bases. At the end of the day, remember, you don't have to, like, at the end of the day, remember, we are all still figuring out how we run our tables. Hell, I've seen Matthew Mercer make mistakes on Critical Role live before. It happens to the best of us.
Yeah. You will never, ever, ever go perfect every single game you run. You'll have some that are actually just fucking perfect and beautiful in every way. There are plenty where something will go off the rails or you get a ruling wrong or whatever, and it changes the dynamic of things. But remember that the goal is to have fun. So even if you mess a rule up or you misinterpret something or you have to suddenly at the very last second change the way something is happening on the scene because like the pacing's weird or whatever when you're running it and it's not going the same way it would have in your head, just have fun with it. You know, just go as far as you want to with it, have fun with it, and it'll all be good. No one at the table will probably even have a clue that something was wrong unless you make them aware of it. So like if you don't have to, don't, just roll with it. Have fun. That's my number one advice. If you improvise, just have fun with it. Do something crazy. Do something that you're like, okay, well, the players are proving maybe they're ready to step it up a notch. And, you know, they killed that first wave with a smart rocket, and I'll send another wave. That also then dies to a smart rocket. I'm not talking about any specific circumstances at all.
Absolutely not.
But,
all right.
But that's going to do it for the first half of the episode here, guys. So if you are watching this on YouTube, the next half is going to be over on Diamond Dust's channel. So definitely go ahead and head on over there. The link will be down in the description, of course, if you're with us over on Spotify or if you're here with us live tonight on Twitch. The show will just keep on rolling after just a brief break here. So give us just a few moments to get connected over on the next part of the episode here. And we will just roll right ahead.